So what I'm going to start with is just bring one or two problems into our focus and then just spend a moment talking about how do we approach and think about problems and tie it into the UN and international community activities, and then tell you about the Organic Food System Program and food service. So let's start. I'd like to start with the real biggie. In my opinion, this is one of our absolute biggest problems, if you like, or challenges. And I think the great thing about science is we're here in a science park, so the science perspective is interesting. In science, we don't feel that problems are negative and we get weighed down and burdened. They're the things that make us sit up and ask questions and say, okay, let's get together. How can we find solutions? How can we develop something for the situation? And I like the way these advertisers for this foundation in Germany picked up on the central idea of Noah today, not Noah many thousands of years ago, and how small the boat of Noah would be today if he had to gather 2 by 2 to really bring home that message of biodiversity loss. Another challenge, urbanization. It's actually a trend. If it's a challenge, it's a chance, but it's definitely a strong trend and it's still continuing year on year. People are wanting to move into cities. Cities are getting bigger. We've got mega cities and we've got huge urban corridors. And a picture like this I love to use for my students and say, now think about every single house and every single household that needs food and it needs water and it needs a system to take the waste away. That's what we've got to think of and work on. And the third and final one, just to pick out one, is transitioning diets. Some of you may know these pictures from Peter Menzel, What the World Eats. They're brilliant to use for students. Again, they carry so much information about foodstuffs and culture and the situation around the globe. On your left, we have a picture of a family in Mali. That's the whole household. It's a polygamous family with a number of wives and children and one male breadwinner. And that's their ration of food for the week. That's what they eat. And I think I can see a few of the faces really smiling. And on the right-hand side, we have a German family in Bachterheide, family Melander, a 4-headed family household, and that's their family rations for the week. That's what they eat in 1 week, typically. And of course, these are very extreme, contrasting photos, but they're chosen purposely to underline the differences we have, and that the challenges moving towards sustainable food systems look different in different places around the world. So in a country like Germany, the challenges we have are a little bit different to the ones in a place like Mali. And we need to make sure that we differentiate what we mean moving. Both of us have to move towards more sustainable food systems, but the directions are slightly different and what we need to do is slightly different. So how should we, or how could we, and how do we think about our problems? Well, I think most of us are familiar, and this I think is still quite a dominant way of thinking about it, is the kind of causal event way of thinking about it, which is shown in this little diagram. So you have A and B as a starting thing, then you move to C, and then D is something that happens because of what A and B do. So the causes, the roots of anything happening are found at the beginning of this linear process. But there's another way of also approaching things, of looking at problems and things, and that's a round way, a systems way of doing it. And it means that none of these individual elements or events are causes, because what happens if you look at things in the circular way is you start discovering feedback loops, things that emerge because of the way things are working, and the power that comes and the developments that come through the feedback loops. Those are the root causes of things that we see emerging. And that's it's a different way of looking at things, and we start to see different things. So this is a way that I think is worth pursuing at the moment. And it brings us in food, in the area of food, in what we typically look at and teach in a kind of a linear chain, a food chain or a value chain way. It brings us into an attempt to see a whole. That is what systems thinking is about. It's trying to find and see and observe the whole. So where we, oh sorry, what have I done now? Taken away there. The pointer, yeah. Where we usually might kind of follow a chain. If we follow a chain, we're going to miss the interaction with policy, with law, with education, and perhaps the feedback loops that come with what happens when we teach certain things, when we tell certain stories, when we make certain laws. What can we make and bring into movement and change? So I think it's one approach that helps us see the wider whole of food. Now, let's look for a moment what is happening in the global community internationally. I think you're very aware that the United Nations, which represents 99.9% of humanity, has in its places that it comes together created the Global Agenda 2030 and has agreed, there has been a consensus on these 17 Sustainable Development Goals that are something that we say as a humanity, as a huge group of people on this globe, we wish to achieve or to work towards by 2030. So that also gives us a good idea of what is the work that needs to be done. And as Helene already said, we have just one of these that we can take out, which I'm going to lead you to, because this 12th one, responsible consumption and production, is on the basis of the work for the Food and Agriculture Organization and the United Nations Environment Programme. So this is just one example of what comes out of these Sustainable Development Goals, these 17. And this is what the FAO and UNEP have created on the, to work on the 12th one of these Sustainable Development Goals. And what they've created is known as the 10-year framework. So it's looking ahead for 10 years. It's work that's been developed for 10 years. It's a framework of programs that are all designed in some way to help to develop, to move, to make this area of consumption and production more sustainable. And at the moment there are 6 sub-programs or 6 programs within this framework, and you can see in some way they're all linked in the food system, and this one is more consumption oriented. But all of the others, in some way, you can see a direct link with the food system. And the one that we are focusing on at the moment is sustainable food systems. And it's here that we have managed to bring in the organic food system as something worth looking at. So when this program was initiated, it was done in a public consultancy way. People were invited, they could give their opinions, their inputs, their ideas into the group working on this and preparing it. Oh, I'm sorry, that's kind of moved around a little bit. Let's see if the next one's better. Okay. What I wanted to do was show you that there are 8 core initiatives within this program. So this Food and Agriculture Organization UNEP program on sustainable food systems went ahead and invited people to tell them, what are you doing about sustainable food systems? And maybe we can choose some of what you're doing and use that to communicate good initiatives. And together with a big group of which Jostein Hertvig here is part of, Johannes Karl, and many, many more around the world, we submitted the Organic Food System Program for consideration. And we were very, very happy to have it recognized as one of 8 core initiatives. And I'd like to share with you what exactly do we do in this organic food system program. So how did we come about, and what does this mean, this term organic food system program? Many of us in this program work and have been working for a long time on in the organic field, in organic food or organic farming. And we had a look at organic, and we said it's been around a long time, and it's spread around the world. And we can almost say there's almost 100 years of experience in the organic field. And it's got a vision, it's got principles, it's even got metrics, it's got data. There are people collecting data on organic food and farming in all countries around the world, and they're bringing it together and making it available. So we can measure things, and we have legislation which defines or helps us distinguish what is organic and what is not organic. And if you're working in a system perspective, you need to know where your boundaries are. So we had a look at this and we said, this is a wonderful opportunity to use organic food and farming around the world as a living laboratory to discover and explore what changes, what developments are possible, and what can we see and learn from an organic food system. So the program itself is a collection, it's a platform of people, and it's coordinated or hosted by 3 groups. One of these is Food Quality and Health, an international researcher network, BERAS, as you've heard, and IFOAM, the World Body for Organic Food. And it's a very mixed group of people. There are partners from research, from education, from business, from public bodies like municipalities, and private people who just say, this is something I find interesting and I want to work on. And all of these are involved in looking into the food system and leveraging what we can find there. So what are some of the things we're doing, and what are the objectives? Well, we do have to start with conceptualizing what is an organic food system, because we have to be able to communicate it. But the other part of that is coming up with the language, and with the language that you have to talk about it, you can start influencing the narrative about food systems. And that can be, I think, quite a powerful thing to do. So we're developing a framework at the moment. It's one of our projects. We want to model systems and assess them because, of course, people are interested. So bring us the data, bring us the numbers, give us evidence on which to make decisions. And we've, last year or the year before in Copenhagen, we did a first workshop with an international scientist group. A lot of the work goes into education, training, and capacity building. We, at the moment, are busy on a European-funded project, SAS+, looking at bringing this topic into e-learning, into summer schools, into modules, making courses available to higher education, tertiary education institutions to work with this. And this is something we'd like to roll out globally to other countries. But of course, one of the most important areas is actually looking at transformation in practice, because this is what the whole issue of Sustainable Development Goals internationally is about. It's about changing, transforming the systems towards more sustainable systems. And for that, at the moment, one of our important instruments is case studies, looking at it in practice. And as has already been said, Södertälje is really a living laboratory for that. You've got something happening here that has been happening that is worthwhile to look at and to learn from. And of course, some of the work is communicating and disseminating. So we have a basic website up, and at the moment, given the nature of the work, a lot of the focus is going into scientific papers, but we hope to take that beyond that. So how do we see the contribution that should come out of this? Well, through the systems approach, we hope and we think that we're able to connect the dots in different ways. We're not necessarily discovering new dots, but we're making different kinds of connections. And one of the examples is that we can move from focusing on products, which, at least in nutrition science, which is where I work, is a very typical frame to look at. We look at one product or one meal and we compare it to another. And then we discuss how sustainable or what needs to be done. But if we do that in a food system, we're going to risk having a kind of a substitution mentality. And we're maybe not going to solve the actual underlying problems. So maybe it'll help to move to different levels, such as moving to a diet level, which is actually the wider sphere of where we have products, or looking at transformation of societies. And at the same time, what we're trying to learn from looking within the organic food system, we're also bringing back into the organic community. So it's a kind of a bi-directional development that we're hoping to achieve and bring things into, develop organic further as well. So just taking that example of the transformation of societies, Södertälje is one of the cases that we're very interested in, and we have one of our students with us, Tuba Jamil, whom you'll meet this afternoon in the workshop, and she's working particularly on this right at the moment. So we have a good chance here, I think, to learn about transformation of a society, because sustainable development, we speak a lot about sustainability, but let's not forget it's about development, and the development is about us. It's human development. That's what all this is for. It's not just some nice little exercise we can do, and we don't just eat food because we need to. There's a lot more that it can enable us to do. So an idea for us, or a question, is also how can this be shared? Because it's not something we want to keep in a closed box, or the ivory tower of science, or universities. So one way, of course, is through education, beyond tertiary education, to schools as well. And lots of case studies. We have a few lined up in other countries, but we're still looking for more. And of course, through the reach of our network or networks like these. And within the Organic Food System program, it's an open network, so we're still very keen to invite and find more partners for research and development, to actually do things on a ground level, and of course, that needs to be financed and supported. Now, that's kind of the bridge from how do we look at things and the different opportunities, the different ways of looking at problems and challenges bring, and how we've integrated that into a program that is linked to the endeavors of the international community. And now I'd like to bring that onto the concrete level, onto the level of food systems within the sphere of meals taken out of home. And just to remind you that it's an area that's very, very big. It's bigger than a lot of people think, because it covers the wide area of public or institutional meals, which we also can term kind of life cycle catering. You can start in a kindergarten, go through school, high school, university, your workplace, the business canteen. Maybe you'll need to go into a hospital, and at some stage into an old age home, possibly if that's a life path. At all of those places, there is meal catering out of home. It's not a home situation. Someone else other than you is organizing that and doing that. So that's a very wide field. And then we have the whole field of private or commercial food service, which is typically the whole range of hotels, restaurants, everything that works into that field. And of course, that covers leisure and travel as well. So the next time you're on a plane, a train, a ship, whatever, all of these have opportunities to eat out of home. And in all of these, the food system has to be organized to work and there are impacts of all the decisions we take along the way. So within this, we can question or look at or make a topic of sustainability. And there are many models around for looking at sustainability in food service or in out of home. This is just a very simple diagram on the input-output way of looking at it. And you can reduce it to the basics. So what do we need? What comes in? Resources and people as well. And it gets transformed in a food service operation to what? Well, to meals, of course, but also to leftovers, to all sorts of packaging, to waste products. And the question also is what happens to people? It's moved off the slide, the development question. Are people learning skills? Are they developing further? Are they increasing their knowledge, their capabilities? What happens in that transformation? And the major topics at the moment, well, I'll do it without this because it's moved. One of the major topics being looked at the moment is the question of food. People are focusing on food, the quality of food. So they're looking at, is it organic? Is it fair trade? Is it sustainably sourced? Has it got an MSC certification if it's seafood? Those sorts of things are being looked at in food. Then also the emissions are being looked at, and we heard the example from Stefan that people are looking at climate impact and meals in public situations. So there are all sorts of developments of climate menus, of calculation instruments, so that people individually or in research groups can work out what are the CO2e emissions coming from meals and can we adjust that. And the other big topic at the moment, sorry, the things are currently off, is the topic of leftovers, of waste. That's getting, in Europe especially, a lot of publicity, and there are a lot of programs and guidelines out to help people at all stages in the chain or in the system to improve on that. But those are just three of the areas that one could look at. There's a lot more, as you can imagine. Why is this area, or why do we say this area is important and needs to be seen a little bit more and addressed a little bit more? Because of the changing dietary habits of people. And this is something not isolated to Europe or to developed countries. It's happening in many, many countries around the world. There's a transition that people are eating more out of home. And it's the same as urbanization. It's been happening for the last 10, 20 years. And what you see on the slide is the portion of any unit of money spent. So your dollar, your euro, your krona here. In the USA, any money spent on food, half of that is spent out of home. So there's only half going into feeding yourselves in a home household. In Germany, it's about a third and growing, so a third of every euro. And in Eastern and Southern Africa, this is a relatively recent study by Churley's group, it's also beginning to pick up. It's still on a relatively low level, but even here it's beginning to pick up. And this is a strong trend. And it's very, very powerful in terms of what is eaten, what do we find in these food service operations, and what impact can we take as those going there and eating. So expenditure out of home is growing. And it means that these places are becoming very much more important to focus on, also in terms of impacts on diet and health, of course. They're a setting for what happens in human diets. And I'm very sorry that the slides have moved around a little bit, the writing. What it's meant to show you is that we here can take these settings, again, as areas, as cases to study and have a look at what we can influence and what impact we can develop by changing, by intervening, by moving these examples. And this slide has been shown last year in November. We were in Delhi at the Organic World Conference. and talked about Södertälje's situation here, and a colleague in Korea as well, a similar situation in public meal systems where people are introducing organic food and other food qualities, environmentally friendly agriculture food products in Korea in the mix as well. And they're rolling it out in a grand scale around into the communities and able to tell us what kind of impacts it's happening. How are the systems changing? How are people changing? How do the meals change? How do the diets change? Because of course you have a different box coming into these. And what we like to look at is why do these examples unfold successfully? And I'm saying successfully because we're seeing them roll out very strongly in a relatively short period of time, given that we're actually changing systems. And what we find in the organic sector is a very large supporting network. This is an example from Germany taken just as screenshots from websites or from booklets. From support that is available to food service actors. So there's support coming from growing associations. In Germany we have Bioland, Naturland, Demeter, organic agriculture organizations. And these have over the years recognized that this food service channel is also a relevant channel to give attention to and to provide support and help for. And they've come up with materials targeted to food service operators. Then we have educators, people helping to train chefs, people helping to train kitchen staff, people taking different aspects. How do you work with organic food? Is it different? Is it different in the machinery of out-of-home food service operations? So there's a whole network of people specializing on that service offer. Then we have kind of peer-to-peer networks, Biomentoren, Bio-Spitzenköche. Biomentoren is a group of organic mentors. They're chefs, they're in charge of very different kinds of food service operations in Germany, from a kindergarten to a great big hospital clinic, and they've got years of experience of working with organic food. And they're open to share that in experience with others on a peer-to-peer level. And that's very effective for helping people if you're not coming as a consultant, but if you're coming with the same experience and background. And that is the same not just in the chefs, but also especially in the tourist area. These are kind of examples, organic hotel networks, or sort of pension networks where people get together on a peer level and share their experience. How did you solve this? How did you do that challenge? Where did you find a supplier? So it's a very effective way to move forward. And then, not least, there is a whole group of consultant type activities happening which are also specialized for this market. So you have to know, how does a food service operation tick? How does it work? What language do you speak to these people? And you have to be able to translate and bridge between perhaps organic farmers and kitchen staff. So there's a very, very wide network that supports this, and I think it makes a very, very big difference. What also can be observed coming out of this, a lot of this work has been done in Europe, but we see it, for example, in the States as well, is that when moves are made to include organic produce or similar quality issues into meal systems, sometimes it's written down. And writing down makes it available again to other people who perhaps are not looking for it, but they come across it, or they're looking for something else and it's included in what they're reading. And the top row that you see here is a range of guidelines for nutrition in out-of-home situations produced in Germany by the Ministry for Agriculture and Nutrition and the German Nutrition Society, the DGE, Deutsche Gesellschaft für Ernährung. And the very first one that was created a number of years ago were the quality standards for school meals. And of course it goes into nutrients and standing time. But there is, towards the back of the booklet, a page on sustainable food service. And it mentions and recommends, how about including 10% organic food? What about looking at this? Look at that. Look at your local suppliers. And the grand thing was, after this one came out, a whole range was created, and this got included in every following booklet. And in this way, these sorts of things can spread increasingly into all sorts of different areas. And we see this in neighboring countries. This is a network, a European hospital network, fresh, local, and organic, right on the front page of a guideline. The student canteens have a network overarching. It's in their procurement guidelines. Then we have a Center for Eco-Literacy in California creating guidelines how to make school meal systems more sustainable. It's in their cookbooks for canteens, not for the home use. This is for professional kitchens. The quality issue has been included. And it even moves into materials for scholars, primary school, secondary school, and into manuals for teachers. So this is, in my opinion, a wonderful example of how a seed idea and an initial move of including organic into perhaps a local municipal kitchen can spread over time. And into other areas and help other people. So that is one further opportunity. And then this is an area where you can do a lot of work in reconnecting people, connecting people more directly and working on the trust and the belief issue about our food systems in understanding it. What you see on these photos are all examples of direct partnerships between an organic farm and a food service operation. This is from an initiative in Germany called Biomacher, which is the organic doers, I suppose one can translate it to. And just as one example, this top one here, you can see this is Bioland Organic Agriculture. This is the farmer. It's a mixed farm with vegetables and with animals. And they provide meat and vegetables to Martin Friedrich. He's the food and beverage manager of Esprit Rating. And Esprit, you may know as the fashion label. They have their headquarters near Düsseldorf in Germany. It's a huge place. And with a very interesting group of employees, mostly young, around 30s the average age, a lot of young women, and they're really, really enjoying the food that they serve. They have a very high usage rate, attendance rate in this canteen, and this is one example of this direct connection. Here's another one for an ice cream cafe, a market situation, a hospital. These are kind of normal restaurants, and a youth hostel. So they're putting a face to this. There are actual people who are doing the work and who are doing the connection. And this is wonderful for telling stories and for bringing across the values and the work of these partnerships. And the final point about that I'd like to make here about the power and the strength that can unfold out of this sort of movement is the experience available if we look into the wider circle and network in something like certification and the trust, following the trust through the circle. These little signs that you see everywhere, you'll recognize some of them, but they're all labels, they're all certification systems for some kind of environmental or social or sustainable marker. So they go way beyond just looking at the organic food quality, but they all include organic food quality. And if we were to explore that and gather the experience and the learning from that, I think we'd create an amazing pool of information and help just out of the experience of in a food system, making sure we can follow it. But there are still some challenges that we have, especially in this field. Our challenges, I think 2 or 3 main ones I'd like to mention, and one of the major ones that I find fascinating is that our social practice of eating is changing. And these photos that you see kind of just are showing you pictures that carry that for the example of drinking coffee. I think this is a picture you're probably familiar with as well, and I certainly see this even in a university setting. My students come to class with their coffee to go and they put it down and they enjoy that. And this has become part of what we consider normal in our society in a very short time. And at the same time, there are numbers already out of how many of these little cups are being generated and going into a system and at some stage becoming waste. And of course, in this field, we ask ourselves, so what can we do about it? And we look at the coffee and we say, okay, let's make that coffee organic and let's make it fair trade coffee. And we look at the cup and we say, well, let's make that cup from materials that we can recycle. That's fine, it's good, it's important, we should be doing that. But none of those measures changes that social practice. None will stop those people getting their coffee to go, or us getting a coffee to go and doing that. And this is where we need to be aware that what we do, what is it that we want to change? Do we want to change the way we do things as well? Then perhaps we need to find some further ways of actually doing that. Because the amount of cups, I don't know, I've had people from the USDA tell me, but it's fine because the life cycle analysis are telling us it's cool, we can do that, it's all right. But if I look at the amount of cups being generated and the cups are just one example, how much of our meals today are in portion packages? If you go shopping in a retail situation, the packages, the portions are smaller and they're more and more ready to eat. That's so much waste being generated in packaging. To me, there's no way that can actually be right. It just seems ridiculous. And it's something I think we can't solve just on a resources level. We have to give more attention to social practice and to perhaps ways of looking at that. The other big challenge we have in the food service arena is the availability of data, because data, there is a lot there and there's a lot more being generated, but it's often locked within the system, and especially within commercial partners, and especially in food. The food system is definitely one where many producers, especially processors and especially trade, keep their data, often for very good reason, but it makes it difficult to find data to actually do work with and to create and engender evidence. So availability is one thing, but a big thing I think coming is the definition question, which is going to link very strongly to our questions. The picture you see on the left-hand side is a very typical travel picture. Someone's at a train station, this is in Germany, and she's got herself a coffee to go, and you can see a little brown paper bag with some baked good. And that, according to our definition, is actually a typical out-of-home eating situation. This woman has bought this, she's eating it, she might stand at a little table. But when we go into the data of this situation, this sale is registered as a bakery sale. It's not registered as an out-of-home sale. So there's a whole area of kind of data mixing where we're not sure, we might not actually be seeing a shift because the way the data is defined. So I think this is a big challenge that we need to look at as well. And just as a last impulse, it's something I like to just throw out there. We have here a situation where, because of this urbanization and because of the nature of the development of our household situations with smaller units, more individual units, we don't have these big family units. All of us in all of our places, and we may even have two if we work here and live there, we have kitchens, we have pots and pans, we have cupboards, we have washing machines, all these things many, many times. And there are people who are saying, is that the way it needs to be? And some of them have actually gone ahead in Switzerland and created a new form of living together with very much smaller household units that are reduced in their kitchen sizes, or even if they don't have kitchens, because they have a communal kitchen which they can all share and use. And there's enough there for everyone to use. And they've solved, for example, the freezer problem, storage. There's just one room in this whole building here, which is at minus 20 degrees. And everyone who lives in these little apartments has access to store their frozen goods down here. So there are some very interesting new ideas for how we could organize our lifestyles. And I think the important thing to me here is asking the questions. It's challenging our assumptions. It's not about, is this the way to do it for everyone? It's about daring to challenge our assumptions. And I think that's where there's opportunity for movement. So let me wrap up, come to a close. I'd like to just bring it back to looking at the situation of public procurement, and I brought you an example from Germany. The city of Munich, this is what it requires from those food service operators who would like to provide the service for the city of Munich. A minimum of 10% of food in organic quality. They look at local production. The food should be from a single animal species, or 30% with an animal welfare standard. MSC quality for marine fish, and fair trade for tea and coffee. So that's just taken from the bigger work. And if you scale this up for Munich, for other cities in Germany, for cities in Europe, and for towns growing out, we can see, just at the example of public procurement, what kind of strength could come from that. If you think of the potential going through life cycle catering, kindergartens, schools, all the way to homes, and we use that to connect organic farmers or small family farms with the people eating, via local governments, via suppliers and other actors, we could perhaps enable virtuous, educative, economic and social cycles. And we could link, we could reconnect the land and the lifestyles through what is eaten, through the diet, and perhaps reap common good benefits over the generations to come. And go all the way to public health. And by doing that, we would be planting a seed towards healthy and sustainable consumption patterns in future. And I always like to use this Dahlgren and Whitehead model. These are determinants of health. And many of us kind of stick around here, but it goes so much beyond into the wider lives. So finally, I've got 4 take-home messages for you. I'd like to bring it together, what I want you to think about, or invite you to think about. The systems thinking, I think, will give us access to more things that we can see, to important things to see. We can use organic and other sustainable goals as change agents, and that's what's happening here in Södertälje and in other places. And it inspires people. That's the value as well, with stories about people who are championing this and the practice in places. And finally, an invitation to you here, and I think that's going to be in the program today from what I've seen, find the way from the Södertälje food system to the Stockholm food system. So thank you, and I've got a few names on there because of course this is work that has been coming about with the help of many, many people, and only some of the names are here, but it's all the discussion and the exchange over time that helps to bring this further, and I look forward to the day discussing and exchanging with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carola. I think I have one solution for you. This is my coffee cup.
Excellent.
It's foldable.
Oh.
And it's only me. Has someone else got this one? Oh, you have?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. 5 people. Oh,
Excellent.
Johanna, she knows about this. Foldable. Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe we have some questions before we go on. Someone would like to ask something, Carola. I will bring you a microphone.
I'm Kjell Malmberg from Swedish Farmers Foundation for Agricultural Research. First of all, thank you for a very inspiring talk. Wonderful. I think you said that in order to promote the development of sustainable diets, we have to move away from looking at the effect of single components and look on a diet level. I didn't understand exactly what you meant by that. Could you perhaps explain it a bit more?
Yes, with pleasure. When we look at food, we in nutrition science, for example, we have food-based recommendations. And I think many of you will know all these kind of pyramids with the different categorization of foods, or you'll know the plate models. This is what you ideally should be eating, what your diet should be composed of. In the current work, where people are looking at sustainability and the questions around it, a lot of that is looking at individual products, which is valid. It needs to be done. But in order for people to understand how to integrate it into what they do every day, every week, every month, over a year, and all their lives, there's a gap there at the moment. And I think that's something that needs to be worked on, that we work out how does food produced by a certain system translate into a diet. And one of the, perhaps an easy marker is looking at animal production. In an organic food system, the principle is to link the land, the amount of land I have, to the amount of animals I can produce or breed on that land. So that means I have a limited system, limited by the space. And that means that when I translate that up, when I bring the products into the food system and onto the retail or the food service operation, I'm going to have less meat. And that needs to be translated into a diet that people will enjoy, not just accept, but will actually enjoy. And a lot of the challenge we find, for example, in food service operation is in the heads to make people realize it's not a matter of just from that plate taking off the meat and saying, okay, we'll give you a little more of the rest. It's unlearning what did you learn at chef school, how to compose a plate, and relearning what is a good, delicious, enjoyable vegetarian or plant-based meal. So it's a wider change. It's a rewiring to integrate that, to translate that, because I think a lot of people are willing to hear, okay, maybe I must watch the quality of the fish, or maybe I must reduce a little bit the meat consumption. But what does it look like in practice? That's for many people still a gap. So that needs some more help and guidance there.
Thank you, Carola.
Thank you.
And she will stay here for the rest of the day, and you will be able to ask